Good evening, everybody. Welcome. It is Monday, November 8th. It is 7:10. I believe we have all of our technical issues worked out. Welcome to the special meeting of the Warren Town Council. Everybody could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Tonight we gather to have a presentation and discussion about the development the Warren Gateway Center at 15 Main Street. We have as our presenter this evening Giovanni Ciccone and Paul Adaman from Union Studios, and we can get right into it. Take it away, Gio.
There we go, I think. Yep, it sounds right. Thank you. My name is Giovanni Ciccone. I'm the development partner with the town on this project. What I'd like to do is just briefly introduce what brings us here tonight, and then ask Paul to walk us through the evolution of the designs that we've got to present to the town at this point. I think at the end, I'd like to talk a little bit about what I think some next steps might be. But I think that should either get wrapped into the discussion or maybe just will come naturally as we have a conversation about the plans. As I think most people know, but for the sake of folks who are viewing and may not know all the history, we started with this process a good year ago, and initially had worked on a somewhat smaller plan with just a brewery and restaurant, restoration of the historic structure, and we put that together. Gosh, I said a year ago. It really has been quite more than that, hasn't it? It's been closer to 20 months. We actually came forward with some general concepts, working with the town staff in January, and put together a proposal for a lease agreement that would have accommodated that. We went back and forth with designs, have worked closely with the planner, Mr. Rulli, as well as others, to try to come to a concept that does a few things. One, doesn't overdevelop the site. We didn't want to overbuild the site. It's a gateway to the town of Warren, but it is not meant to be sort of a massive undertaking on that site. I think the key feature, which we've tried to emphasize here, is a public lawn, which takes up approximately a third of the site, and then the rest of it was sort of designed from there so that folks could take advantage of that public infrastructure, also take advantage of the final northern component of the walkways along the riverfront, and then also recognize that this is truly an intermodal site with not only the road access, but easy proximity to the bike path, as we said, the river walk, and in fact, even access to the river, both for recreational fishing or boating or what have you. So the point was to try to make this a very unique development that not only reflected well in the town of Warren, but served to be an attraction for people by all modes of transport to come and dip their toe, as it were, into Warren, and by doing so, really become an economic development driver and an economic development access point for the town. So we came with that smaller plan, and after some conversation, it was suggested that to really capture the value of this site and to really make sure we do it right the first time, one thing that the town doesn't have is hotel room capacity, and that would be a real value add, not only for the businesses along Water Street and the historic district, but really for the town as a whole. East Bay as a whole does not have much in terms of rooms to be rented, and aside from sort of scattered Airbnb type rentals, but something that would really be the anchor of a destination for this district. Would be well served, I guess, in the opinion of many people, by having some hotel capacity. So what we did is we went back to the drawing board about probably 4 months ago now, and worked with Union Studios to come up with a way to still recognize all those guiding principles we started with, the public access, having a site that's not overbuilt, taking advantage of the unique components of this site, but also adding in something that could be, both economically feasible and useful in terms of hotel capacity. So what we presented today, what we will present today, does all of that. We think it does it fairly well. I'm going to ask Paul. I've asked Paul to sort of walk through the thought process that got to the different components we have here, why they're the size they are, why they're the place they are, why they face a certain way. And so I think he's prepared to walk you through that. As I said, I'm happy to answer questions and talk about next steps, but I think maybe it'd be helpful to hear his journey, I guess, first, and then we can go from there, if that's okay.
Good.
Thanks, Giovanni. Good evening, members of the council and others in the public. I'm Paul Atman with Union Studio Architecture and Urban Community Design. And I'm also a town of Warren resident. Thanks for the great introduction, and I'll try to keep it brief because I think it'll probably be, once we get into the plans, it'll be pretty self-explanatory, and we can probably be open, spend more time on questions and answers. Everyone on the board and the council knows the site fairly well, but for people that are viewing, on the left-hand side, this is a vicinity map. The site is along the Palmer River, right at the foot of the bridge between Barrington and Warren on the north end of town. It's on the northern parcel of the American Tourister building, and a historic site of now that's been recently developed into commercial and residential for a nice mixed-use development. On the north is Belcher Cove that wraps around the backside of Route 114 and the bike path that comes over the bridge from the west. A little aerial that takes you a little closer to home here. There's an existing pad of a foundation of an old building that is no longer there, but the pad itself is. The existing, what everyone calls a National Grid building on the north. It's a small historic building that we're proposing to preserve and add to. And then, as you know, the 98% of the site is paved and hard surface. So there's very little permeable paving, and there's this lone tree all by its lonesome here by the river. The new, relatively new Riverwalk, it bounds the south part of the property line and swerves down around the American Tourister building, which you can see in this dark outline at the bottom of your slide in the sheet. And then it heads south along the river, and that's part of the new Riverwalk. It really right now dead ends at 114, and if there's some effort to be made past Gills Auto or K&W Auto now, there's an opportunity to connect to the bike path, but that's a vision down the road to be talked about, but something in the back of our mind for sure. Instead, in our proposed plan, we're looking for other connection points and extension of the Riverwalk toward the bridge, and maybe take advantage of the pedestrian and pedestrian activity along the bridge and its recently completed renovation of years ago. This year's just a quick site analysis to show you some of the considerations we've taken into play. As I mentioned, there's an existing building pad on the south part of the site. The existing Riverwalk comes along the south part. The main access point currently is these 4 black triangles right here, and that's a pretty tough spot coming in and out of the site because of the curve of 114 heading and swooping around the existing building. There's nice vantage points and views, these marked by these red arrows to the south down the Palmer River and toward the Warren River and the rest of the Warren downtown and working waterfront, and then off to the west on these arrows toward Barrington. There's winds from the north in the winter, and there's southerly breezes in the summer up the river from the south. It has some great southern exposure that we hope to take advantage of for the brewer hall and the hotel units on the south side. Here, if you can see this on the upper right-hand part of your slide, is the connection that I mentioned that would be a great opportunity to somehow, whether north of the auto shop or south of the auto shop, to make a connection to the bike path. As you know, this site is very close to the Tourister, which is a very large building. It's 55 or 56 feet up to the top of the existing, the historical cornice, and then another extending 66 to 72 feet to the top of the new penthouses. But what the Tourister does offer is some architectural elements to look at for inspiration and context, where we have large windows and many of them in a rhythmic pattern that was built in this for the mill purposes. But then there's other areas that were added onto with large openings that have been glazed with corrugated siding, mostly brick. And that is in this little addition on the south side of the Tourister building. There's other openings here that have been utilized and repurposed for a patio off of either an office or a residence. And then large windows that are filled in from floor to ceiling and wall to wall. So there's really an opportunity in the hotel rooms to take advantage of that wall space and to get some light and air and make the windows nice and generous and in keeping with the large fenestration of the Tourister. As I mentioned, there's really tall proportions and rhythmic proportions of the windows, both horizontally and vertically, and a very down understated cornice line that makes it really a much, when you look afar, it looks boxy, but when you start looking closely, it's rich with detail. And these sort of windows that aren't large are where the stair is. So there's opportunity to look at unique conditions of the Tourister for some inspiration of the new building. These here are a couple of slides of our precedent images that reflect sort of the ideas that we want to pursue in the project and we look toward for inspiration. This is Bristol Harbor, where there's a river walk already developed and a lot of activity along the river with Hotel the Stone Harbor and the Bristol Harbor Hotel here. There's a boardwalk here on the middle top slide. There's tiered seating that could spill out onto a lawn from an elevated terrace. And then down here on the lower left, some casual seating that along the river that people can get close to the water and enjoy the water and the sunsets. On the right-hand side, this is an image of a restaurant and event space in an old building, very much like the National Grid building itself with its masonry with arched openings. And in this case, it has a deep overhang, but you can see how there's an opportunity for some nice dining and event space and use of that existing building. I'm going to jump a little bit in scale and show you some hotel projects and also some fenestrations and materials that are indicative of hotels and renovation of existing buildings. The top here on the left and the middle is actually a new hotel in Providence. They call it the A-Loft, right along the riverfront at the foot of the west foot of the new pedestrian bridge. But from a distance, it's a nice simple mass, but you get up close and it's articulated with metal siding and different types of exposures and treatment to create some very subtle and nice detail, let's say between this siding here on the corner and then between the windows. The windows are framed so they have and popped out a little bit so that they provide some nice relief and shadow lines. The middle lower one is a project we did in Newport, the backside of Hammett's Wharf. It recently completed about a year and a half ago, right across the street from the post office on America's Cup Boulevard. But you can see that it's 3 stories. It has a strong base. It's kind of covered parking that is treated with a screen, so you don't see it from the backside, but it's very accessible. On the left is a new construction, but it looks like an old mill. And the reason we're showing this is that you can see sort of the similar rhythmic patterns that the American Tourister building represents, and large windows for hotel room glazing. And on the right here, just another detail of some trellis work, metal siding, and simple punctured openings in the siding with accent color. So now I'll take you to the site plan, the overall site plan. The upper left here is a vicinity map showing the parcel itself just north of the Tourister building, the north end of it. So you can see the relative size of the Tourister, and we're only seeing a small portion of the north end of it, and the relatively small footprint of the proposed building, and then the even smaller addition to the existing building on the very north side. So the challenge here is parking and circulation. It's a small site, and I think we've done a good job of respecting and trying to maximize the amount of parking and the amount of program that is being considered. So we are in negotiations also with Tourister, the owners, Brady Sullivan, to provide access easement from their current curb cut and their entrance point, which is south of what currently is at our site, for safety and circulation reasons. So that now we have a clear entrance into the Tourister site, but as you pass into it, you can go right into the parking area at the forecourt at grade, and then pass underneath the building to covered parking and out through the south end of the building. And so it creates nice circulation for all visitors to the site, and maintains safe access to 114. As I mentioned, this here, the building, the ground floor, or the first floor level, and the terrace, which is E. This is the new elevated terrace. That elevated terrace connects the new building, ground floor, first floor, as well as the existing building, which will be elevated. The existing building will have a small annex added to the east side along the road for kitchen and support for the bakery and cafe. And it'll spill out onto the terrace, elevated terrace, which then spills down to the garden, which is here indicated in keynote F. It is elevated a little bit above the proposed boardwalk that comes along the west side of the site. And earlier I mentioned that we looked at an opportunity to continue the river walk on the south part of the site up along the left here on the west. It comes along past the building, past the proposed docks, the lawn, and then with a proposed stair can climb up the stairs and connect to the bridge. You can also this is a graded walkway that brings you up to the sidewalk here, so people can also don't have to traverse steps if they don't choose not to or can't, and continue along the sidewalk up to the bridge. Please chime in, Joe, with anything.
It might be worth just noting that we didn't talk about this in the council before, but the reason for the elevation is that so the idea that these terraces are all elevated is more of a necessity than a desire. The possibility of elevating the historic building is not just to bring it up, but also to protect it and take it out of the mosque building. So, solve all out is part of sustainability of this project. Good point. Thank you.
Yeah.
The contractor that we spoke to, who gave us an estimate for that effort to raise the historic building. As I walked through there, we looked at the construction of it. The floor, the main floor is based on some very solid beams that are still in good shape. So I think what would happen is that he would place temporary beams underneath those floor beams and lift from there. I think the question then becomes, what happens below that? Is it, do you just continue the brickwork that was the original foundation? Does some of it get covered up by the platform of the elevated terrace? On the 114 side, you probably have an opportunity to do some work to continue the brickwork. On other parts, it'll be hidden in any case.
You're lifting the structure.
The structure, yeah. So the structure is, it's a steel beam floor system with poured concrete sitting on the foundation. So you would lift from that part up.
And that'll give us the opportunity to not only elevate and build a platform, but to park underneath it. So it's a double duty. At one point, we weren't considering that, and it really limited the amount of parking that we could provide on this site.
I'm sorry, so you're saying that there would be parking underneath the grid building?
No.
Okay.
And we're going to jump to the next slide here, which will show that ground level plane. So as I mentioned here, this is grade, this parking area here. And as you come along and enter underneath the new building, that is where the covered parking is.
That's what I thought.
Here on the upper part of your page, the gray poche, that is the existing building right here. So that is not getting parked underneath. I won't spend much time here on this plan because you can see that the parking's laid out to its maximum potential. We pocheted in the walls just for it to read a little better, but that'll be all breakaway construction per building code requirements. So it looks very solid, but we plan to have breakaway walls and build to construction code.
Do you have numbers on the interior number of parking spaces, totals? I know you've got little numbers there, but added up with the total underneath.
We do, and we can count them up really quickly.
I'm just curious, like how many are under?
33 underneath and 15 exterior.
So I know that we're showing the parking once again, but that's something that you see on the first few floor plans. So this here is the first floor plan with the elevated terrace wrapping around on the east side, north side, and west side of the new building, as well as the west side of the existing building, which is here up at the top of the page. There's how we laid this out was really to sort of, when the hotel program became part of the project, there was a lot of program fighting for space. And so we selected to create a sort of a common lobby that the hotel manages and sort of is a central spine of the floor plan. And as that becomes the main entrance into the building, from that is the main entrance to the brewery. Once you pass through this lobby to the brewery on the south side, with large windows looking south and with garage door type doors to the west out onto the elevated platform terrace. And then off to the north, off of this common lobby that I mentioned, to the north is the restaurant, which is a smaller space. The dining is here on the northwest corner with double height ceiling, there's a double story ceiling, and then a kitchen toward the back. This gray area here is shared bathrooms that all of the patrons and the staff would use, both the brewery, the restaurant, and let's say hotel guests or the hotel lobby, along with the public. So there was a definite need and the discussion of providing bathrooms for sort of public bathrooms during times that the lawn was being used for public events.
So those would be the exclusive public bathrooms available to somebody who might just be down there fishing or walking by and whatever. And so that's it. There's no other exterior or public amenities or public bathrooms.
Correct. Yeah, there's not a standalone sort of restroom pavilion, if that's what you're asking. It's all tied into the building. What the advantage of this, I mean, there's a number of advantages, but the main advantage is that what we have here, because there's so much else going on in the building, that you end up with a dozen stalls total use, as opposed to what we had in the original plans, which were just two public stalls. So there's a lot more access, and when you have a busier event, your capacity will be adequate, I should say.
And the hours of availability?
What we'd agreed in the memorandum of understanding with the town originally was that we would keep them open during whatever hours the restaurants and other users were open. That was what we had come up with, 2 years ago now, I guess, when we first talked about this. It won't be 24/7. I certainly talk about that, but the idea to secure that and maintain it, for longer hours becomes a real expense. And so we'd have to figure out how that was paid for. With the matching up the business hours, you end up with, sort of an easier way to share all the costs.
The hotel is open 24/7.
Yes. Yeah, no, I was referring to the restaurant and brewery hours,
Those
cafe.
restrooms are utilized by hotel people, right? So
Yeah, I guess in theory, somebody who was checking into the hotel at 3 a.m. would have access to that as well. I would think that the outside doors would probably be locked.
not that it needs to be accessible 24/7, but I think my recollection was that there'd be more public restaurants, as opposed to inside the building, which isn't really something that people realize if they're down along the
Sure.
boardwalk. So I think that's a bit of a concern.
Okay, I think that's a fair point. And I'm sure Paul could chime in on that. I think, what maybe should be just pointed out there is that it's not only accessible through the inside. So there are exterior doors, both to the men's and women's room. We can talk about signage and how we direct people to those. There's a lot of, I think, potential solutions to that very issue. To say, if you're on the pier and nature calls, we don't want you to get creative, right? We want to have an easy way for you to identify that you can just walk around the corner.
Right.
Have,
It's important that there's not a perception that you have to go buy something, or that you have to be a guest or a member or part of something to be able to use those facilities, because it is part of a public space there, and the public needs the signage that's down the road and whatnot, but it needs to be made very clear that
wherever the cursor is, you see the two small doors there. That is directly to the outside. You don't have to walk by the lobby or the concierge or the security, whatever it might be. Walk in as a member of the public without any permission, without asking.
Yeah, it's I was in Newport recently, and we have all the waterfront access there and buildings, but they're very good about pointing out where the public restrooms are. I mean, it's very easy to use, and I think that's something that is important to me. I'm not sure how much the rest of the council. I think that's part of what I'd like to see now.
I have a question about the brewery. Is it just a straight brewery, or is it like a brewery with a brew pub and all of that?
Sorry, and I wanted to mention this, and of course I have my back to him, so I forgot. But Kyle Michaud from 12 Guns Brewing is sitting behind me, and so at any point, if you'd like him to chime in as to the concept there, feel free. At this point, I think I can comfortably say what he's aiming to do is have the brewery, which is to the right there, actually brewing beer and hard seltzers and what have you, and then to the left is the tap room, the public area, serving beer.
and that is, you will just exclusively be serving beer. There will be no food service.
Yeah, that's correct. So with the accompaniment of the restaurant, and also we have a lot of current relationships with food trucks, which is, I don't know if I'm throwing a wrench in the works by even mentioning food trucks at the property, but we will not need to have food service in the room.
I don't know if we can rely on a food truck.
Do we address that now? just, we have an ordinance in town about food trucks in the proximity to restaurants, so that probably wouldn't work at this space. Not to throw the monkey in your wrench. Yeah, but, yeah, unfortunately, yeah, so that would be a problematic thing. Going back to the parking, Paul, we'll put our zoning hats on. Is that feasible? Is that enough parking for this? The 33, the 40, what do you have, 48 total?
You're putting me on the spot, Steve.
I'm sorry.
No.
Yeah,
They're going to need, the easement agreement with Brady Sullivan would be for both access as well as shared parking.
okay.
They can't park the entire project on
Yeah.
the site.
Yeah,
Well, so if we're partnered with it, that's not, zoning's not gonna
Right,
be an
there is no-
issue
Right. There's no
because it's the town, but I still wanted to see if we were thinking, and I know, I have confidence, I know you're thinking about it, because that's what we did. Yeah, so,
And I would add that in addition to the town and ourselves and everyone else, the potential hotel operator, that has been the primary question, with everyone I've spoken to on how this might operate, the boutique hotel. Because the town Bob suggested we aim for like a 30 or 40 room layout to see if that would work. That seems like a good capacity given the size of the town and the lack of other hotel capacity. So we asked Paul and his team to come up with a 40 room concept, which he'll get to in a couple pages and show you how that's laid out. I do think that we're parking limited right now. So although we'll show you 40 rooms, I can tell you that if we can't figure out a way to improve the parking situation here, and then there's some creative solutions that have been brought up too, with stacking cars and what have you. But we won't be able to accommodate 40 rooms if we only have 48 parking spots, because Kyle and the cafe and the restaurant won't have anywhere to put their patrons.
so you know what's happening with the whole tourist property when it was first coming before zoning and it was first coming before into the town, is that we were like, they're always gonna have so much parking, but now that property is starting to fill up. So the parking is becoming, I'm not gonna say a premium, but it's becoming, you have to bring it into the equation.
They've actually created more parking there by eliminating the commercial units on the first floor and converting those to residential. So they're actually, as they do that, they're adding to the surplus.
Perfect. Yeah. And do they utilize all the parking inside?
I don't know if they're utilizing. I mean, I think those are leased spaces.
Is that what at least? Okay.
I can say that it's a good problem to have to some extent, because if you have demand, that means you have value.
Yes.
And if you have value, then you can afford to spend more money on parking solutions than just plain old surface parking.
Excuse me, Mr. DeSisto, did you have something to say?
Just a quick question, because it goes to licensing. Is this going to be a tasting room only? Understood. Okay. The question you were asking was whether or not it'd be a brew pub. That's a separate license. This will be a manufacturing license. So there'll be a so-called tap room. Somebody can come in and do the tasting. Does that allow, and only because I don't know, does that allow for people to come in with growlers and things of that nature? Okay.
So that's class what? We don't have a class for that currently on our list, do we?
You don't. It's basically what DBR does with these types of manufacturing licenses. The license will come from the state, which is what you have now, but they look for the town to sign off on that. In this instance, unlike the brew pub, you won't have to issue a BV license because there'll be no food or anything else. This will be for manufacturing, and with the manufacturer's license, they can sell to wholesalers, but they can also have a tap room where people come in for tastings, and they can also sell carry out, either six packs. I don't know if you do that now, or growlers or things of that nature.
All right, I don't know when it's time to start.
Yeah.
When we get to the financial part of it, there'll probably be some questions of how this all works, but.
Okay.
Let's
Well,
continue
then I'll
on
make it
with
quick.
the, with the design portion.
Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
Before we get, I don't want to lose this as the discussion moves along quickly, but one other point I want to make is that the folks that we're talking to about the bakery and the National Grid building, that annex that's on the back is probably more room than they need. We had originally built it to allow for potentially having the public restrooms attached to that annex. They've come back to us and said, look, we don't need that amount of space. They do much of their baking at a commissary separate from their retail location. So we expect that they'll come back to us at some point soon with a slightly reduced version of the annex that's attached to the historic building. So although we showed it with the sort of layout we had originally designed, I can tell you that it'll probably end up being a few square feet, a couple hundred square feet smaller than it shows here.
Could that be turned into parking? I mean, not the way you have it designed out right now.
I don't see how you would access it. Yeah.
It might.
I don't think that the reduction of square footage will amount to
Will amount
much
to enough for that.
usable circulation space. If anything, it'll allow for a little bit better loading, a little more room here, and screening of the trash enclosure.
One thing it might allow, and this, again, we're not showing this here because it's a little too soon to pin this down, but Paul and I have talked about where we would accommodate e-bike and scooter parking and smaller vehicles. And so, any saving of square feet, you don't need a lot of room. You don't need a full-size parking space to take a couple e-bikes or put a bike rack or add scooters and all that. So we'll end up fine-tuning it with some of that, which, obviously will make it easier for people to come to and from the site. It's not the same as a full car parking spot, obviously, but any reduction will give us another slot to put in, 3 scooters or 5 e-bikes or whatever it might be.
So before I leave this slide, I just wanted to point out that sort of the arrival point that we designed is really taking the Riverwalk into consideration and the vehicular parking, so that at the south end here, there's a small sort of surface hardscape plaza, small plaza, that then from there you can step up rise up to the terrace and take the ramp up. And the arrival point is here at the front door of the hotel, brewery, and restaurant, with the site still very within sight and access to the bakery and the historic facade and the doors on the south facade of the existing building. So we think that this aligns very nicely to the Riverwalk and the rest of the tourister in terms of circulation and arrival space.
HC is.
Handicap? Yep. And we're also preserving the 9 CRMC spots along here, although we've displaced 2 for this access point, they'll be relocated along the southern part right here.
So those being designated as CRMC spots, that means those are for people who are going to access the water?
Correct.
Okay.
Some of those already exist on the source of permits, so we have to maintain.
Yeah.
So signage would actually limit that parking to.
That I don't know what the arrangement, it's public access parking. So however.
There's signage out there today that says that in the first few spaces that are
Mhm.
in there, there's that same signage we use. I don't think it's like legal, but confidence.
I mentioned that because obviously there's going to be high demand for parking, and just disregard it. I know there's situations in town where parking as a premium and some parking wars, and we don't want to make sure that those spots are designated correctly. So
Mhm.
you need to access them well.
I'm going to move on to the second floor plan and third floor plan. The second floor plan is an extension of the brewery use. So as Kyle mentioned, that on the left-hand side on the ground floor is a tap room and seating. There's this internal stair that brings you up to the second floor of the brewery for some more additional seating, as well as some offices. On the north side, it's a 2-story space looking down onto the restaurant, so that is not floor space on the northwest corner. But on the northeast corner, there's a tenant space for fitness that Giovanni has interest of a small sort of support fitness program or business for the hotel as an extension of the hotel amenities. This here is a double-story space, and below are the big brew tanks that you should keep in mind, because we've opened up some glazing and focus point along this facade, so you can see the tanks behind the glass from 114. The third floor and fourth floor are primarily the same. Really, it's the hotel use. And with the square footprint, which is 100 by 100 of the overall footprint of the building, all the rooms are on the perimeter of the floor plan, the floor plate. And then on the center is the circulation, back of house, and support spaces for the hotel operation. As you can see on the third floor, that's the same as the second floor. And then on the top, calling the penthouse floor plan, is really an extension of hotel amenity space for a very reduced floor area on the rooftop, with a rooftop deck proposed on the west side of the penthouse. We thought I'd like to share a site section. So if you go up to the vicinity map here on the upper left, imagine a cut right through the site looking east. We did this so that we could see what the height of the proposed building and structure looks like relative to the neighboring Tourister building. So as you can see, in your packets, from finished grade up to the top of the let's say the penthouse floor, it's about 56 feet. And then if you extend up to the top of the roof of the penthouse, we're about 66 feet. Right across the way, the existing Tourister, the main volume is 52 to 54 feet. And then the very top of the penthouse at any point is 72 feet. So we're about 4 to 5, maybe 6 feet lower than the highest point of the Tourister.
While this slide is up, I just want to add two small points. You want to mention the guiding points and guiding principles that were suggested to us during this process. This was a very important piece in two ways. One was, as we understood, we would need to go up higher to accommodate the hotel use. The direction was, let's not try to come up with something that goes up higher than Tourister, right? Let's leave Tourister as the dominant feature in this area, and this building should not, impose over Tourister in any way. So obviously, Paul just explained that we've kept those numbers down in a significant and visible way, so that when you drive down the road, you'll tell that this is smaller than what's next to it. And also, I could have mentioned this earlier, but I think when you look at the vicinity plan up in the corner, as Paul mentioned, it's about 100 by 100 building that we're proposing there. It's something like 20, and I don't count on the number here, but it's like 20% of the lot coverage for this site. So when it's about 20% of the 1.4 acres,
Okay, 20% of the entire.
the footprint of that building is about 20% of the site. Yeah. And so again, we took that as sort of a way to make sure that we weren't overdeveloping, that we weren't putting too imposing a structure, and that we still had sort of big open spaces like the lawn and like the front entrance, which is at grade, to sort of to give a nice airy feel, I guess is the only way I can say it, to the whole development. And again, it also shows, the distance from Tourister, that open space between the buildings. And so we didn't want things to be on top of each other. We didn't want them to be taller than Tourister, and we didn't want it to take over too much of the site. And I think, Paul and his team have really, gone to great lengths to try to achieve that.
Thank you.
Perspective, looking at it like that, I mean, obviously it's in scale in terms of building. I'm just imagining that as you come over the bridge, it's right on top. So it's, even though it's not taller than the Tourister, it's just it's a pretty big mass when you're coming around and from that scale, from that more than I expected. I'm just throwing that out there. I did not expect to see that kind of a size scale building. Again, looking at it from this perspective, yeah, it's in scale with the Tourister, but when you're on that bridge and you're coming around that corner, it's going to be.
It's not insignificant. I mean, that's absolutely true. To accommodate the hotel component, it is a much bigger project than we had originally discussed. But again, the other dimension I should probably reference is the width there. The width of that building. So as you come around, the Tourister face to the north is at least twice twice the dimension. So at some point, I guess on 114, I couldn't tell you exactly where you'd have to be, but you could stare at that building. You'll see the roof of Tourister. You'll see both sides of Tourister on either side of it. And it will sort of, I don't want to say fade into that background because we're going to use different materials and all that, but the massing should not present anything that's more imposing than what's been there for, I don't know how many decades with Tourister.
The penthouse is set back pretty much on all four sides, correct?
Correct. That's true. And that's in the north. Yep. So I'll move on to the elevations for the back end of the presentation. This here is the east elevation facing 114 with the stairs here on the foreground leading up to the entrance of the hotel entrance. And to the left is a brewery on the first floor, and on the right behind here, this is access to the public bathrooms, as we mentioned before, and the restaurant beyond. The third and fourth floor is all hotel. It's set back at the middle to create a relief, to provide relief on the facade. And then, as you can see, the penthouse that we talked about is set back at every side, with the exception of this corner here, because right here on the southeast corner is this required stair hall to connect all the floors for egress. And so what we've done is we've actually extended a bit of that wall here and created an opportunity for signage for the project that you could be painted onto the corrugated metal siding or the metal panel siding. We're still exploring that. We're not doing masonry because it would be probably a lot of brick on this site, but also it's expensive. But so looking towards some more industrial language and using metal panels, as I showed you before, we can get some nice articulation of vertical siding on the top floors, horizontal articulation that looks like rusticated pediment base along the first and second floors and create a strong belt course at that between the second and third floor level to start bringing down the scale so it doesn't look and appear as tall, but it's it's grounded. It's a two-story base with a top that's lighter and airier. So we've gone to great lengths to try to really fine tune this, and I think it'll only get better as we start modeling and picking materials and getting into the details.
Coloration, is that what we expect to see?
It's our first stab at it. I mean, the color by committee is always tough. So it's an early rendition of what we were proposing we like. We think it's in keeping with the palettes and some of the buildings up and down Water Street.
What is the sort of exterior maintenance? Like how often does a finish like that, a material like that need to be repainted or stained or buffed or whatever happens to it? Does it just weather and it's always, or does it require sort of scheduled maintenance?
It depends what product we end up with, but
Yeah.
if it's a pre-finished Kynar or pre-finished metal product, it should last for a long time and be low maintenance. Probably cleaning is probably one thing that can be easily done, just to keep the dirt and grit off of it so that it can last longer, but it's fairly maintenance free down the road. So with this environment along the river and the winds, it's a very good
So there's
solution.
experience with these combinations of corrugated, exposed fasteners, panels, and whatnot, as far as with the salt air and that type of wind and wear and tear over time, they perform well.
To my knowledge, yeah. And it also is all about installation and detailing it correctly for weather barriers and rain barriers. So that and detailing to keep the water out of the building.
And is that all costed once we get to the financial part? That's all sort of baked into the cost of the build out, these type of materials?
Yeah, the materials, are We haven't costed out these materials.
Okay.
Yeah, we've done per square footage cost estimates, but I can tell you that these are not the most expensive materials out there, right? If we did brickwork and tried to duplicate Tourister, that would be an arm and a leg. These are actually, fairly reasonable when it comes to commercial construction compared to some of the other options that are out there, and somewhat lower maintenance. And I think one of the great advantages of this sort of design concept is that we've said from the beginning, we want to look to the historic neighborhood. We want to look not only to the sort of colonial era color palettes that you see on houses up and down Water Street and elsewhere, but also the sort of working waterfront types of materials. So that metal paneling, the board and batten, those features that have been there for 50 or 100 years on the working waterfront buildings in Warren have demonstrated the test of time to some extent. A lot of those types of materials have withstood many, many decades and fairly well.
Thanks. And for an accent and sort of to soften up some of the elevations, we're proposing on the inset recess some vertical wood siding that could weather over time and give a more softer and feel to the elevations, break up a lot of the areas of the metal siding. Moving around to the west side, it's much similar to the front, except that on the base, there's double stories glazing for the restaurant. There's double story for the lobby at the rear of the restaurant, hotel, and brewery entrance. And then on the south end, there's a deck that is underneath the trellis that people on the second floor can have access to, a small deck that will provide some nice views and seating for the brewery. The south elevation, it was probably the harder one to solve for, because here it is a big elevation. It's facing the Tourister. It is the area where you have access in and out of the garage, which is this large area here. It's in, out on either side. But I think it's come together nicely with respecting these larger windows that are to the brewery and the tap room. This here's all utility. So this is a lift coming up from the ground level to the first floor for the brewery, with a storage on the ground floor, and then on the first floor mechanical. So this is very sort of industrial adage to the building. So if you keep this in mind, we've also replicated that on the north side. So there's, like I showed you earlier, American Tourister buildings could be seen as a big cube, but when you start looking closely in the back side, things have been added on over time. So these are sort of those elements that we're using or inspiring to add some interest and articulation of some volumes. This here's a north elevation with the access to the restaurant right off the elevated terrace, right here at this point here, to the left of the double-story windows, and then a small, low, one-story bump out on the ground floor, first floor, that is a part of the kitchen. And what we imagined, and we're proposing that there could be service windows, kitchen service windows there, so that when there's public events at the lawn, the restaurant could service the lawn event by selling hamburgers, hot dogs, some other foods for the event. So that it becomes sort of a to-go window that people can order in and out of and bring food down to the lawn and enjoy. Oh,
I just had one more thought on the massing question. This is your north view. So this is coming from 114, sort of as you round the corner. That's roughly what you'll see. I think it's worth noting that the height that we're dealing with here off of grade is not quite the same as what you'll see, because we're going to be starting up on the terrace level. So the comparison to Tourister, where we're 5 or 6 feet less than them, really the building itself will look much smaller, because you see Tourister all the way down to their parking lot from this side, right? So that's it's a 10-foot longer stretch than that sort of elevation drawing would indicate. This side will look much more compact relative to Tourister, because you've got the lawn and the terraces sort of working their way up to that.
And then I'll leave you with this rendering or the black and white perspective.
So.
Thank you.
In regard to that, I do see that you have sort of docks and boats and water, use of the waterway there. Is that part of your intention, or is that more just a? looks nice?
I'd love it to be part of the plan, and I think that's probably a conversation that has to be had with a lot of folks.
Yeah.
We've been out there with your harbor master, first and foremost, and he had concerns about the current running through there.
Yeah.
And so what we've talked about doing, if the town is agreeable, is hiring a marine consultant to do an analysis of that, the current, the depths, all of those things along the water there. I think that would be a requirement we would have to do if we were to go to CRMC and ask that question of them. But I can tell you on the initial observations are that yes, well, the current is pretty heavy down the center of that stretch. Because of the bridge abutment to the north, there's actually a fairly calm 30 or 40 feet of water against the shore there. And so navigating up and down there is not as difficult as it may seem if you just say, well, if I took my little boat up the middle of the river, I'd have to fight the current and the bridges there and all that. So what we want the consultant to look at is, okay, well, is it reasonable for people to navigate closer to shore? Are there obstructions? Are there rocks under the water? Are there things that would make it difficult? Because I mean, I was driving over the bridge this weekend, watching, sort of almost a whitewater level breeze coming through there. And as soon as you get to the edge of the abutment, 40 feet off the shore, it's perfectly calm. And you can see the current tearing next to it. So I know that's going to be dependent on a lot of things every day. Every boater has to be aware of the weather and the currents and all that. But I think in terms of the safety issue, if we could answer the question to our satisfaction, we don't want liability, obviously, of people trying to get to a dock that is unreachable. But that being said, I can tell you that the potential tenants love the idea, and I think the public would love the idea of being able to access this intermodal hub by one more mode. And boats are part of our culture here, and people manage to get up and down the river safely every day. And so I'd love to see that as at least an option. In the end, it's going to be a CRMC call, I think. And what I'd like to ask for is the town's support that we go to ask that question.
Objection.
Ask away.
Objection.
Saul asking that question, mentioning that early on, and I actually did look at, I was curious as to what that might be. And I was fascinated by the number of options that are out there. A lot of it's very new technologies. But that river runs.
Set up there, charging stations for cars.
Power, UV station. Okay.
Yeah, I'm fine with it.
There's gotta be some grant money for that, right?
Yeah. Well, before, with this presentation and everything, I'd like to go down the road here with the council to see if they have any questions about the design and the amenities and any feedback, and then if there's any questions from the members of the public who are here, just to get some feedback there as well. So, Councilman Kalenda.
Thank you.
Excuse me, wait one second.
Go ahead.
I think, can we just address some of the financial questions to then, so the council has some perspective? Or whatever your pleasure is.
Yeah, I mean, seeing as we've just, while it's all fresh, this presentation of the physical design, let's get that stuff out of the way, and then we can get into the numbers.
I'll be quick. I promised Paul I wouldn't torture him too much, but it seems some of the questions and concerns you've already addressed. The parking, you brought up the height, you brought up the appearance of the building when it's coming into our gateway. All those hurdles can be addressed as the project moves forward. I feel this is a little premature to start drilling down on you in depth. Go ahead.
I would ask you to maybe drill, as they say. This is, you're 20-something months into this, right? What I need to take out of this at some point very soon, not tonight necessarily, but at some point very soon, is a clear direction so that I can take these and get our construction manager to real numbers on all of these questions.
Okay.
Right?
Well,
And
the biggest,
I don't have a set plan in hand that say this is what we're going to build.
okay, well then, my direction for you would be, if you're looking for some type of an easement with Brady Sullivan, then you need to bring that back to us.
100%.
Yeah.
That'll be really about
I can hear you loud and clear. Yeah,
But absolutely, that was one of my first next steps on my list tonight. You can't go to Brady Sullivan unless we have a site plan that's approved by the town. Because we have to give them a survey that says, here's what we're asking for. This driveway comes from here, 67 feet from the fire rod, the point in the corner. And that's what that easement would eventually include. And obviously, here's the ones that have the sign off on this one. But if I don't have a site plan that's approved, conceptual master plan that's approved, then it's very difficult for us to go to them and say, okay, well, the river walks that come through here, it's like curved like this. Okay, well, no, now we're going to put a parking spot there. So now it's different. They're not going to want to spend time to go back and forth with either the town or us, unless we have somebody who said this step has been taken. Right? We're going to build this project. And now we need to talk about the details of that easement, which of course, run through your solicitor, and back to you for signature.
okay, and then I'm just gonna follow up that with, to the Tony. So Tony, we're actually sitting as planning and zoning.
You have site plan approval, yes.
Yeah, this doesn't have to go to planning, doesn't have to go to zoning, it's with us.
Because the town is not subject to zoning
Yeah,
and planning.
okay.
That's the,
Just so that everybody's on the same page, so that's okay.
however, under the MOU, you do have approval of all of these matters.
Yes. Yeah, okay, that's all I have. You can move.
Yeah, as Brant said, I was a little shocked at the overall height. But after looking at the design, and you are gonna see that when you come over the bridge, but because of the last page is the one that gave me a better concept of it, you're gonna see all of this open space also as you're coming off the bridge, so it's gonna be set back, so I don't think it's gonna be as far out of line. And actually, I think it's a nice looking building. I think it's a nice building to have as a gateway. When you see that, gateway doesn't have to be all grass and trees. It can be a nice piece of architecture. And so I'm comfortable with the design as it's been.
Yep.
So on the American Tourister plan, because, before I sat on council, I was sitting on zoning. I was actually against the big tourist sign. When it came through zoning, I actually voted against it because I just couldn't visually grasp that signage. But now that it's there, I'm like, okay, I stand corrected. I was wrong. It actually does fit. So I'm okay with the concept. I'm okay with the concept, and I think that's fine the way it's going to fit. So thanks. I just wanted that.
Sure. Councilman?
You were wrong. I did. Wow.
Hopefully my wife's not listening.
I think it's a bit cartoonish. The white tourister sign. I think it's, the much, but that's just me. Councilman Hecker?
I think you touched on some of the kind of issues and questions that I had. Although, again, size and scale is larger than I anticipated. Okay. And I'm a little concerned about impact and traffic. I was sitting on planning when Tourister came in front of us, and there was a lot of time spent on traffic in and out of that site. It's a lot of concern. I have to say that it hasn't proven to be a problem. So their traffic engineers were correct. That being said, you've got 4 significant entities in this proposal. It's a lot of traffic in and out. You have any concern that your traffic study might not bear out?
I think, we are concerned, about the traffic and one of the first concerns we have. And, once installed, the first way we tried to address that was this discussion with, Greg Sullivan about eliminating the access that's from the site, further away from the bridge and the curve going along the bridge. And taking advantage of we already have and the access. I think they've got a lot of traffic engineer. I don't play on TV, so take this for what it's worth. I can tell you with my experience coming in out of Terrace and spending a lot of time on Water Street, I drive that not every day, but at least close to it. One thing I've noticed is that folks that access the first mills don't use that first entrance. They use the second one coming out. That takes you along the residences. That's along that western side. If you come in the first driveway, you have to go around the front of the building, around the water side, back up around the buildings. So I think in terms of where their traffic is being concentrated, it's not this entrance, the one that we'll be sharing, it's the next one down. It surprised me in my mind, I have one down from Water Street. First one to drive along back to the building. Working out now, I think it's actually not a bad solution. There were underutilized entrance. What I tell you for sure is we can't solve 114's traffic problem. So, I don't think another 48 parking spots is going to be measurably worse. Not having to think a lot of credit that would then, at the same time every day, people can use the trips. Yeah. So we've got a cafe and bakery that'll be open at 7 in the morning. Got a brewery and restaurant that'll close at 10 at night. A hotel that has a different traffic pattern, from there. So I think to the extent we can, build out on the site, we're going to have some motions. Very conscious of traffic and parking. Better way to sort of address those issues. Nice.
I think too, Brent, that, Terrace was approved, it assumed all that commercial space in Terrace was going to be built out. And that was part of the traffic calculation. That's gone away. So, I mean, some of that could be picked up by this site, but, also hotels tend to be, you get there, you park your car, and you're not moving your car again until you leave. So I don't think you're going to see the frequency. I mean, there might be a slight impact, but I think it's negated a little bit by, eliminating the commercial uses in the ground floor.
Even compared to most hotels, this is another conversation we've had with some operators. This is a walkable waterfront, right? Boardwalk. We've now got a good stretch where you spend time outside and not getting in the car.
I would imagine that utilize this hotel would be not, then because it traveled it. So utilize them.
Yeah, right. Yeah, a lot of Uber spot, for drop off for sure.
Is it more than you see there? How is that going to be handled?
Question. I think the battery's set in mind for us, like, holding it.
I can hear you. To keep it as open as possible for whatever.
It's to be used for events. It's really, that was, you know, I've never heard any suggestions, at least, that there's a better or higher or better use for that other than the lawn. I mean, obviously there's financially better uses, but in terms of the public good here, you know, that is a place to go and throw a blanket down, and maybe it's a place to have a little band shell and have a concert in the summer. You know, there's different things you can do. The folks we've talked to about the music components of this did indicate, you know, as they stood out there, that the traffic noise was an issue. So that's why we wanted to put that line of trees up there. The trade-off you have with the trees, and this is what a landscape architect will finally make the decision on. It won't be me or even Paul, I don't think, but that line of trees is an important buffer for sound and somewhat visibility of the cars whipping by. But you also don't want to lose the visibility of the site as you come south on 114, right? It's a gateway. It's supposed to be a visible gateway, not hidden behind, evergreens. So I think there's, more conversation to be had. We are talking to an engineering firm about the landscape architecture component of this. This will not be done in-house. It will be done with professionals who know much better than I do what type of trees those will be and whatever else. The other point I'll mention is that lawn, the big financial advantage, I guess, the economic advantage to having that lawn there is that the stormwater management system can be placed almost exclusively underneath that lawn. And so it'll be, constructed under there and as part of the elevation of the whole thing. But that will be more than adequate. Well, I shouldn't say not alone, but with that and a little bit under the outdoor open parking, we'll have more than adequate stormwater capacity for the whole site.
Good? Yeah. I would add, the importance of really highlighting the accessibility by different modes of transportation, not making, parking is always an issue. We can talk about parking every month, but the bike, scooter, e-bike, bus, Uber station, all of that, and really making that a component of the design is encouraging people to arrive by foot and bike and whatnot, really get that message drilled in. Is there any issue with such a hard surface for that building as far as the street noise bouncing off of it? Is that a thing? Because it's right there, at the street, the
Creating more sound.
yeah, just
Sound comes off the one.
yeah. Does that sort of, it doesn't absorb sound, it would, yeah. Just wondering from an acoustic point of view. Yeah, with panels and soft stuff and whatnot, but exteriorly, I just wonder if that's ever been an issue. Yeah, it does, and we know that from where we live. I can hear what's happening at the band shell, and I'm in the north end, and I'm just wondering how sound bouncing off that building is going to do anything, but we may never know that. Yeah, that is the accessibility and the is important. Is anybody here? Does anybody have a question? Ms. McGafflin, would you like to just come forward? I think that the microphone that Gio has there is now newly, there's a charged one. Just introduce yourself, name and address.
Linda McGafflin, 42 Market Street, member of the Warren Arts and Culture Commission. I'm just interested.
Speak into the microphone.
It's fine. Okay, is this better? Okay. I'm just wondering how you're going to manage access to the lawn area and, what kinds of events will be there, and, you know, what, and also, is there any thought to providing space for any kind of public art?
Thank you. So in terms of sort of negotiating the access to the lawn, that's actually an interesting question. And I've talked to a variety of potential tenants about how that might work. I can tell you that sort of the cafe folks don't have any interest in running that because they don't really have any benefit from that. The potential restaurant tenants I've spoken to, some have an interest, some don't. I can tell you Kyle has a great interest in you know, having a hand in that. So I think, at least from my perspective, it would probably come down to either, well, I should say one of those three tenants or some combination of those three tenants, each having some sort of, you know, input into the scheduling of what goes there, and sort of managing it, you know, through some sort of, I hate to say committee, but some sort of mutual agreement from the tenants, because they'll be the ones that would have to provide service and cleanup and all the things that go with having events. They can also make some money, you know, if there's a wedding or if there's a festival or whatever it might be. There's a, you know, a financial upside to the tenants, which I want to make sure they can avail themselves to. You know, and then I think that you know, the last component is, how does the town want to participate in that? Do you? Maybe you don't. Maybe it's just you know, a hassle that you don't want to impose on your administration and your staff. If that's something you don't want to be a part of, then maybe we could put some general guidelines in the either the lease or the, you know, something that runs with the land, so that there's some, you know, if the town has an interest that it would like to see protected in terms of how that public access works, it is my expectation, and it has been all along, that there will be some restriction on that lawn to make sure it stays a lawn and to make sure it stays accessible to the people born. And in terms of public art, we haven't, you know, sort of programmed that in to any one component. I'm a great promoter, not promoter, I should say, an advocate, a supporter of public art. I'd like to see it maximized, you know, in whatever way we can. You know, we have not sort of plugged those sorts of details in anywhere yet.
The town will be very, that will be part of an expectation that there is adequate space and place within the whole design for public art. That's so much part of our identity.
Yep.
That it would, you know, just be a real loss if we didn't have some specific sites, pads, opportunities to incorporate public art into all of this. And, you know, yeah.
Yeah, I'm 100% supportive of that, and you know, we can get those details sorted out promptly and without much debate, I don't think.
Okay, very good. Any other questions? Please come forward.
Hi, I'm Jim Goff, and I've got multiple hats tonight. I originally came as part of the Warren Arts and Culture Commission, and so public art has been addressed. My current address is 46 Patterson, Warren, but we lived at Tourister for 3 years, overlooking that site. Road noise was astoundingly not bad. And those windows are 12 feet high and 8 feet wide. One of the reasons the driveway closest to the bridge does not have a lot of traffic, it's very nasty getting out of there. So most of the residents avoid it. Sometimes I'd park on the water side and drive all the way around the building. My wife, we always mainly use the main entrance. She'd go out the Water Street entrance to avoid Main Street. So, yeah, I think it's a great idea. Next to tourism, just had 10%. exterior doors, bathrooms, building, for people. You know, parking lot, and like that. Like that.
Thank you.
And I would know that, I think I have this right, that Tourister gets $20 a bike spot as a fee. So there's a value there. Might be an accounting issue.
We're gonna send you a bill for boarding.
I appreciate those comments, and I think obviously Paul deserves, and his team deserve all the credit for really trying to size this properly and still accommodate everything that we asked them to accommodate there. It was there were a lot of iterations, I guess. Let's say it that way. I'm glad to hear about the road noise, and again on the public art. I look forward to coming up with some creative solutions.
All right, unless there are any other questions from the audience, I think it's probably a good time to start getting into the financial part. I'll let Planner Rooley kick that off.
Yeah, so I recognize that you don't have final numbers or hard numbers, but looking at the sources and uses that you provided to Hilltop and to us, I do have some questions, and I think that the council should be aware of why we're asking these questions. With respect to the URBA funding, you have a number of 5.1 million, and URBA is capped at 5 million. So how do we account for that additional 115,000?
Yeah, so the URBA bond guarantee is capped at 5 million, but URBA can be a partner and issue larger amounts. And so, in theory, we could issue, we could have a $7 million participation from URBA if that was necessary, but only 5 million of it would be backed by that URBA guarantee. So what we did was we just tried to get that, at least for this preliminary purpose, we tried to get that number as close as possible to 5 million. If it came down to it and we were trying to close this tomorrow and these numbers held, we would probably just find another 115,000 in equity, because the cost of issuing something above 5 million would be tens of thousands of dollars compared to just issuing the base $5 million URBA bond. So my hope is that between value engineering and planning and fine tuning and sharpening pencils, we'll be able to get the whole project cost down just a little bit and stay within the URBA cap. If for some reason it goes in the other direction, it's still possible, but you're correct. That is their guarantee limit.
And similarly, you have an assumption that the town's TIF is 1.6 million. And, to the extent that it's something less, I mean, we don't have final numbers, so we're not able to put any valuation on what potential tax revenue is. It's hypothetical at this point. And the town hasn't made any decisions as terms of, what they're comfortable with and what our borrowing can be. So to the extent that is something less than 1.6 million, is that coming in additional equity as well?
It will have to come from somewhere, right? That's the key with any project. It has to come from somewhere. I think what I'd like to do, again, these are the numbers we had as of today. We assumed a 60% participation by the town in terms of the tax revenue. We estimated tax revenue through a combination of sort of what the costs are and then a conversation with your tax assessor early on as to how some of this might be valued. I will not vouch for the accuracy of the assessment, and until we have something that the assessor can look at and say, okay, here's the square footage, here's the construction, we won't have that number pinned down. So yes, it would have to either come from equity, it would have to come from maybe a grant for some component of the fishing pier or the hydropower, whatever it is. There are other potential small sources, I think, that could make up if that number shifts a little bit. I would honestly suggest that we've tried to be very conservative about estimating the as-built value of this to the town, so that we we don't end up on the wrong side of that number. I think if anything, either the number would go up if we set it at 60%, or the percentage would go down based on a higher finished valuation. And there's some other complexities that I'm sort of glossing over, and I know you and I have talked about them, Bob, but I don't want to go on a tangent. I'm trying to just answer
No,
your
but I
basic
think
question.
you need to, I mean, the board, the council needs to understand that, you know, we're eking up to what our borrowing limit is. And so the amount of the TIF could potentially put us over that.
So the town is the purchasing the bond.
It's going, theoretically, the developer purchases the bond, but we're in essence the guarantee of the bond.
So you're purchasing the bond.
Well, no. So with a TIF, what would happen is we come to an agreement about how we're going to what the formula we'll use to get to the TIF, whatever that is. And so let's say it comes out to $1.6 million. The town will then approve that bond under their redevelopment authority, district TIF authority. That will be sold to some investment fund or bank or insurance company or whoever it is that's out there buying municipal bonds on that particular day. You will be the ones who are responsible for the payment, but you'll pay it with the tax dollars that we're paying you, the real estate property tax, and only 60% of it. So you have 60% of the tax revenue going to pay that bond payment for the next 20 years, and then you have 40% going into the town coffers.
So for sure of your numbers.
Right.
Not of the numbers.
Well, yes, and boy, so do I, right? I mean, we all have to be very sure of them. And you know, I can tell you you know, the way you get to an assurance on this and the way I get to an assurance are the same. I have put these numbers together based on what a private bank would tolerate in terms of a loan, a deal structure. How much equity, what the revenues are, whether those revenues are, you know, from a nationally guaranteed tenant or a local tenant. You know, what type of tenant it is. You know, hotels are very, you know, they can fluctuate. Breweries tend to be more steady. There's all sorts of analyses that go into play there, way beyond my ability to do a loan. So I rely on folks like the smart people who run the URBA bonding program, who came and we sat with Tony and Bob, you know, 6 months ago, and they said, yes, we will fund this deal based on the tenant, you know, this is before the hotel, based on the tenant mix that we had. I can tell you that they've reviewed Kyle, and he can tell you this if you'd rather hear it from him. They reviewed Kyle's numbers and plans in great detail. Not only have they committed to him to, you know, to fund the move to this, but to provide additional funding for his business based on those representations. So, and based on his financials. So I'm very comfortable that what we're putting together here is a strong tenant mix. And I wouldn't want to be at the front of a project that didn't have that, you know, level of comfort. And a lot of it is cushion, right? So we build in things like vacancy factors into these numbers, and I think those show up. To your point, Councilor Cronin, we build in depreciation accounts, reserve accounts, maintenance accounts. All of these things are part of these calculations, and the bank wants to see all those, and then they still want to see us with a comfortable cushion in terms of the rents at the end of that process. But those funds sit there in a dedicated account so that when the metal siding finally does wear out, you know, 30 years from now, there's the money to replace it sitting in an account, not having to get pulled out of a tree somewhere. So all of those components are in the numbers that we've shared, and those are all sort of what a typical bank would look to when they look at these types of numbers. And at least the bankers that we've been talking to have said that on the last iteration, it was adequate for their purposes.
I mean, we'll get in.
If I could just weigh in on that, to elaborate on that issue with the TIF bonding. So absolutely understood that. So that the TIF, the payment on the TIF bond would come from the proceeds on this property. So it wouldn't come from the general tax base. I think it's important to mention that. However, it does still count towards our debt to net taxable valuation ratio that we have to have as a town. So the most recent ratio that we have is 2.8%. So that's our existing debt to net taxable valuation. The limit is 3%. So as of the last audit, we were very close to that limit. Now, next year, some of that debt, old debt, is going to drop off. So that's going to bring us down to 2.22%. which does give us a little space under that 3% cap, but it's something that we are going to have to keep an eye on, because this will count on kind of on our balance sheet, and we're going to have to make sure that we don't limit our other potential items that we may need to borrow for.
Like Medicom.
Exactly. So it's going to be something where obviously it's kind of a chicken and an egg thing, because we need to know what the value of this project is going to be, because it'll add to the net tax valuation. So it's going to add on both sides of the equation, and then we'll have to recalculate. But it's something that we definitely will have to keep an eye on, because we don't want to be getting close to that 3% number.
But I think another consideration too is that the way that TIF is structured, those funds have to be for a public purpose. And in my mind, the public purpose is the site improvements, elevating it out of the flood zone, stormwater management. You know, based on the preliminary numbers, that's like $1.1 million. So TIF at 1.6 is, I don't know that that's your decision, and MuniCap will walk you through that, but you know, you're in essence investing then 500,000 towards the other vertical development cost, and you may not want to do that. So, I mean, I think we need to have that analysis. I mean, my other question is as it stands now, if we looked at this as being partners, we're in for 17% of equity based on acquisition cost and the projected TIF revenue, where Geo is in at 5%. So, I mean, we've got significant skin in the game in this project, you know, based on these preliminary numbers. The hotel unit owner equity, can you just explain to us what unit owner equity is?
Right. So, you know, one of the issues we have with the hotel is that, you know, this is not your typically sized hotel, right? It's small by maybe a 2/3. To have even 40 rooms would be, you know, not just boutique-y, but mini boutique-y. You know, to finance this with a typical hotel operator where they would come in and pay for their build out and just, you know, basically offset all the costs that we have there, is not probably feasible. We're still asking if there's folks out there that will do that, but it's, you know, it's not a Marriott or a Fairfield Inn or one of your typical hotel deals. And for a lot of reasons, it's not one of those, right? I don't think that's what you want to see there. You know, in order to do that, you've got to come up with a different way to finance it. So what we're looking at is a model that we think has actually been done at least one other time in Rhode Island, but is much more common in other parts of the country, which is, and the nomenclature is a little deceiving, but it's like a hotel condominium. So it is a sale of the unit interest. So people can buy individual units of the hotel, and then they get leased out through the hotel front desk, essentially. And the investor makes money when their room is rented, and they can also have some arrangement for personal use of it. And there's a, you know, variety of benefits and features, and they can also get some tax deductions on mortgage interest and things like that. There would be limits, and for more than one reason here, similar to many of these hotel condos. So somebody can't do that and then simply use it as a condominium, right? So there would be limits on how many days they could stay there themselves in a given period of time. Other things to make sure that what we're talking about is a hotel and not a condominium and not a residential use. And those are in, you know, 300-page legal documents that you know, we'll have to sort out at some point. So what I'm looking at there, Bob, is the sale of those unit interests.
Would those units be financed individually?
Financed individually. So there are.
It's like a glorified timeshare.
Yes.
Well,
So,
they
yeah, if you want, I mean,
actually,
with all the negative connotations of that.
But I mean,
aside,
but theoretically, you could be in a situation where there could be units being foreclosed.
Sure.
yes. Yeah. They refer to it as condotels.
I'm sorry.
Condotels. So
Condotels, yeah.
Condotels.
Yeah.
And what they do is they do have financing. The problem is because they're not owner occupied, the financing rates that are attached to those become a little bit problematic, where some lenders shy away from them because they don't want to get into the foreclosure business. I'm not saying it's not possible, but it is. I know exactly what you're talking about.
And I think, you know, let's try to dig a little deeper on that. And I'm not an expert in many things, as you'll learn tonight, right? This is one of those many things. But what they do is really twofold. One is that those condo documents leave it so that it's not as if you're in a condominium and the unit's being sold back to the bank, right? There are restrictions on the transfer of those unit interests. It's not a unit like a regular residential condominium. It's a unit interest. And that's a very limited right to the revenue stream. And so those those banks that do finance these are very involved in the drafting of those documents to protect their interests. And their interests are my interests and are your interests, I guess to put it simply. But those, it's not like a timeshare in the sense that, people might be concerned about. It is just simply a different way to invest in a hotel property.
Okay, here's the thing. We can spend hours debating this issue. I look at it as a sale lease back myself. Could be wrong.
You gotta choose.
I think this is what you need to do. That's the one that needs to have the design, have a site plan. House, if now you need to know that final fees, financing that developer has project. Then you can start making some concrete steps on this thing.
So commitment letter.
Yes.
Well, I would say no, because if I don't know what the TIF is, I don't know what to ask the bank for, and I don't know what to ask my investment partners for. Right? If we don't have a number that will hold on that TIF, then am I going in and saying this will give you a 3% return, or I have to come up with another 1.6 million and it'll give you a negative 5% return? Without a few more of those questions answered, I can't give you a bank commitment.
Right,
I can't give you an investor commitment.
I'm going to have trouble advising you on the TIF and things of that nature, and your financial advisors will too. It seems to me there's a bit of a standoff here.
Yeah.
On in terms of the numbers, and I'm having difficulty trying to figure out how we get over this hump. Because I don't know how we're going to be able to do the TIF if we don't have the other pieces to the puzzle. We've got Geo saying, I can't give you the pieces of the puzzle until I know what the TIF is. You got there's an issue here, and it needs to be solved, and I don't know how you do that, particularly at the end of the meeting.
I can tell you how I expected it to happen, and maybe Tony will tell me that I misjudged somehow. But my expectation was that we would agree on a project to be built, and I would leave, if not this meeting, at some meeting soon, with an approval from the town to go ahead and take the next steps to put the financing package together. Secondly, I would want to get some agreement at least on a formula for a TIF. Now, what that means, we can discuss. But if I don't have a formula that I can plug into my spreadsheets and then go to my investors and go to my bank and say, here's what the town has agreed to. It may not be 1.6 million. It may be a different number because what we agreed to was 60% of the tax revenue, right? It could be higher. It could be lower. But as long as I have something where I can say, no, the town has committed to do this, to do a TIF, and here's the formula we're going to use. I don't even know what to ask the bank to do, right? Am I asking for a $5.1 million loan, or am I asking for a $6.7 million loan? Because that's the difference in those two numbers.
So are we to convene another meeting?
I mean, in our- I mean,
With the TIF advisor?
The conversations that the manager and I have had with both bond counsel and financial advisors, and I had a call this morning with Commerce, is that, there's a possibility that get some letter of commitment or interest from a lender that, yeah, we'll do this deal, subject to knowing this, and this. My concern also is that, so if a hotel operator wants to come in and just do a hotel and not just condominium thing, then that changes the sources and uses significantly by, a factor of maybe 1.2 million. That's a big hole. My other concern is that when I'm looking at the schedule, the schedule is sliding away. If my understanding is that 12 Guns is expecting delivery of their space by next June or July, that's not going to happen. Under the best circumstances, that's not happening. We're not complete with the CRMC application. have to presume that CRMC is going to look at that application, is going to come back with revisions. The historic review hasn't been done. Supply chain, availability of a contract. I mean, there are a lot of wild cards that have, I mean, this schedule has already slipped. So to say that we're in the middle of November, that perhaps maybe by February is very optimistic, you'd have CRMC approval. There's no way this is, we might be looking at June 23, not June 22. And how does that impact 12 guns? And how does that impact borrowing? What the cost of money is? I mean, all those things are in play.
Mr. DeSisto, what is the absolute next step we must take?
Well, let me make a suggestion on this so that we can get over this hump, because I think that this is really the next step that needs to be taken is the one that will get it so a project can go forward. What I'd recommend is we just, if we could arrange a meeting, Gio, with the banks you're talking to and our financial advisors, and then come up with a plan that we can present to the council so that we can go forward on this project. I think once this issue is solved, then you can start talking about all these things that Bob just mentioned, what you need to do. So I think that's something that we're going to have to do here.
Okay, I think that's.
And I don't think we're going to solve it tonight, but I think that's what we need to do.
I think that's sorry. I think that's fair, and I think that's perfectly fine. In terms of schedule slipping, absolutely. I mean, this, as I said, it was in my mind. I was thinking a year. It's been 20 months plus already. If we don't take concrete steps, then it will continue to slip, and that's what concerns me going forward. It's, we are where we are today. Can't change what happened yesterday. We can't change the fact that we had COVID. We can't change supply chain issues. But there are some things we can do sort of proactively and take concrete steps. And really, that's what I'm asking, is that we take steps so that I know what I'm going off and running forward with. And so I don't, like I said, I don't need a final answer on the TIF tonight by any stretch. But what I'd like to have at least a good sense of is that the town is seriously considering this and is capable of doing it and is willing to do it and can do it within a certain number of meetings, so that when I go to the lenders and I show them the sources and uses that says 1.618 million, I'm not pulling that number out of thin air, right?
We're saying that the site work is 1.1, then that's what the TIF is going to be.
Well, we've got, if you look at the sources and uses, Bob, it's 2.495 for the site. And you're looking at the BN numbers from the last project.
Okay.
Which doesn't include any of the structured parking or anything like that. So that's why that number is significantly higher.
These are the types of discussions I think we need to have with the finance people on both sides, so that we can give you a more concrete and definitive report so that you can move forward.
Yeah, and structured parking is not a public benefit. That's a benefit to the hotel.
Well,
the public benefit is the public space, the bathrooms, stormwater.
I don't want to dive into that too deeply.
I think that we need to agree that this evening's outcome, the action is going to be setting this next meeting between all of the financial bank, get that all settled so you can make a proposal to us that will give us something we can really understand.
Well, that's what I'm hoping for, that you have all of the components for the financing of this deal, because on the town end, you're dealing with all taxpayer money.
Yep.
So these are the things you have to know before you go forward. And I think we're going to be able to do that and to give you not only the presentation that you saw tonight, but a similar presentation on how it's going to get paid for.
And this tonight, I mean, for all the concerns about the financing side at this stage, what I hear tonight is something very encouraging to me, and it sort of tells me that the council, at least, and the members of the public that spoke tonight are generally in favor of this. And so I feel much more comfortable now moving forward to sort of dig into those details. And I appreciate your time and your feedback, because not having that, it's a very expensive process we're going through. And so each week and month that goes by, there's a lot of money going out the door to move this forward. And I'm glad to hear that the council is sort of where we are, I guess, on at least what we showed you tonight. I know we can solve the financing problems, and there's a lot of fine points raised. none of which are unsolvable with the program as we have it laid out. The one other issue, though, that I would ask you just to think about maybe for our next conversation has come up a number of times, and I just don't know where the council stands on this, and I'd like to know if I should put any effort into this analysis. One of the questions that came up with bond counsel and financial advisors, or not financial advisors, but with bond counsel and others, was that it complicates the TIF and it complicates our financing if the land is owned by the town and we lease it for 50 plus years or whatever it was that we had proposed in the MOU. I know we had a purchase option built in after 10 years in the agreement that we had, and that the town was open to the idea or actually interested in seeing the land sort of off its books and just become a plain old taxable property going forward. One thing I've heard from the folks, and I think Tony and Bob were in those meetings as well, was that we would simplify this financing if we just moved directly to ownership as opposed to having a intervening lease period. Now, that creates a whole nother set of issues because we would have to pay you for the property. We've agreed in the MOU to pay you not only for what you paid for the land, but the costs that you've incurred since then. So there would be another, sources and uses would shift by another significant amount, $700,000+ if not more. But if you're open to doing that, I'd like to explore that with the manager
But
and the
then
planner.
you're subject to zoning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I didn't mean it. I didn't mean before we built.
I think it'd be
but-
disingenuous for us to say that it's the town.
shift
And
it
then the
over
next
after we
day-
Go through zoning, yeah.
Yeah,
Well-
so it could be something that we would consider, but right now, I think we need to get
Yeah.
past this next hurdle.
Yeah, I mean, real
before
quick,
we
the
make-
proper thing is probably if maybe reducing that 10 years to, a shorter thing, that would probably be the most appropriate thing or the only appropriate thing. But yeah, like Bob said,
By the way,
Yeah. Yeah.
this was purchased with bond money. I'd rather have that conversation at a later date.
Yeah.
Because there could be
Okay.
implications with the bond.
Well, that's all a fair answer. And that's really what I wanted to do was just float it and then see how many issues that raised as opposed to the issues with not doing it. So now I know.
so you stuck your toe in the water and you went up to your ankle.
And then I pulled it right back out, put my sock back on.
Manly.
I have one more question, and it's actually for the architect. Did you run any preliminary numbers? Do your numbers of construction costs, are they comparable to the numbers he's provided us on your design?
Well, we've worked with a contractor who provided Giovanni with the preliminary construction costs and have been updated along the way. Since our initial engagement with Bean Brothers, you've fed them the information and they've updated the numbers, and I'll have Gio talk about that.
What we did initially, we actually we're talking to two separate construction managers, and they both provided not only sort of rough line item, preliminary line item numbers, but also construction schedules. And they were both, the schedules are both roughly the same. And of course, as Bob points out, every month that goes by, the schedule gets pushed off another month. But for these numbers, for these construction numbers, what we did is we integrated components from each of those construction managers' proposals, and then adjusted for square footage costs that Paul gave us, because obviously there's more square feet here than before. Much of the site work didn't change, so those numbers held. Some of them we just had to estimate based on per square foot numbers. Now that we have a plan to go back to them with, we've actually gotten to the point where I think we're going to select one of those construction managers, hand them these plans now that I think they'll hold, and have them start the process, the next phase of the process, which is a much more detailed cost estimating. And that's only a matter of weeks before we'll have something new from them that reflects this set of plans.
Okay, I have one question, and I'm sorry, remind me your name, Mr. 12 Guns. Kyle, hi, welcome. You've been sitting there all this time. So while we have you, I just need to kind of get my head around, we have two identified potential tenants we have 7 Stars, who I think everybody kind of knows about, and they have quite the reputation, and I don't think there's any built-in concern about whether they know what they're doing in putting a bakery into or selling their product out of that space there. You're a little newer to the game and whatnot, and I'm trying to understand how many cups of beers or growlers or, bottles or tanks of beer you need to produce and sell to meet the financial sort of the monthly nut there. It doesn't quite make sense, like for the square footage and the value of your product. How does that work?
Sure. So the good thing about beers, it's really inexpensive to make. Margins are great. Currently, right now, we're producing about 1,000 gallons a week. A lot of our revenue actually comes from outside of the tap room as well. We're in 300 accounts. We blanket Rhode Island. We actually grew 300% through COVID. Our beer's winning awards, so we definitely know our process. Our product's really good. We have branched out. We do beer, we do hard seltzer. Our hard seltzer brand is selling 6-1 to beer, and it's not because the beer's not good. It's just it's a seltzer market right now. A lot of people like it. The question of how much do we need to sell to cover our costs is different than what we plan to do here. So our projections come from hard numbers, which unfortunately our numbers reflective through COVID because we've been open just over 2 years now. In the last 12 months, we've had those difficult months, but the numbers coming out of that, we took those. I have a financial advisor. I sat down with him. We ran through everything until we were really comfortable with it. He's been with us since even before the beginning, so he knows the business in and out. We basically took those numbers on what we were doing in the taproom and in distribution, and we just scaled them to what the square footage of this place was coming from where we are. And that lends the 3-year projection that I believe I sent to Mike, who may or may not be here. I'm not sure. Yeah, okay. So if you see those, the numbers are representative. I'm definitely comfortable with them. It's a scale that we need from our place right now. I can't meet demand where I am. I can't physically produce any more beer. And I still have people calling me, in the accounts out in the market on a weekly basis asking for more stuff. So to bridge that gap, and when we start talking about timing and stuff, it's not going to put me in a tough spot if we're not hitting June, July. This is a location that I want to invest in and really be here. We're looking to make an experience. We want to invest into the building itself to host that experience for local people. We were talking about art. We actually run a monthly artisans venue at the brewery right now where local vendors come in, they can sell their product, they have a great time, pair it with food and music and all that great stuff, which utilizes the lawn. I'm going on a lot of subjects here, but we do a lot of stuff. So we really try and get involved in our community. I mean, we do fundraisers for our local fire department. We just raised 13 grand for them a few months ago. They had a great time. I'm sure we'll be doing that on an annual basis at this point. We're going into self-distribution instead of using a third party, so it's a little bit more reliable. The product's represented better. We can move more of it ourselves. There's a lot of levers to this. So this location really helps. We've been contract brewing actually out of Boston in order to hit our accounts and grow our demand. So a lot of it's made here in Bristol currently, but have a considerable more amount coming out of Boston currently.
And what is your relationship with the other small brewers in the region, specifically the Guild?
Sure. So we're all part of, so there is the Guild, which is the business who has their Pawtucket and Warren location now. And then there is the Rhode Island Brewers Guild, which is the conglomerate that is the entity that goes to the state for us, and they speak for all the breweries in general. And we all utilize that network. So we all know each other. We're all very friendly. I help out as many breweries as I can. There's instances where they're just looking for a material and I have extra of it, so I'll bring it to them, or vice versa. I think it's going to be a great opportunity there for having the Guild. I don't see it being any kind of competition thing. We both do different things. The Guild is a contract brewery, and they make beer for really, really big brands out of their location in Pawtucket. This new one is their tap room model, which is awesome. I've been there many times since they've opened. I've had conversations. I don't know them very closely, but I have met with the owners. Having an opportunity like this where you can hit a bakery, a restaurant, you can hang out, you can walk right down the road, not get in your car, hit another brewery, they serve food too. I think it's a really good opportunity for the area.
Good. I mean, we are a small town. Everybody knows everybody else. And I like to think that our businesses, our retailers, our arts groups all support each other and have, really nice relationships that we've really built and nurtured. And, I would feel terrible to, get too far down the road and find out there's anything negative there whatsoever. So it's good to hear that you have these relationships that you've been working on and building, and you looked at this from all the angles. So that's
Absolutely.
I would add that the brewing community in Rhode Island is, in my experience, is a very friendly environment. I was the original host for the East Bay Homebrew Club for many years over in Barrington, and they sort of outgrew the little space in our store, and are now having their meetings at Kyle's space down in Bristol. But they were the national champion homebrewers. They would have brewmasters come in from all the local breweries in Rhode Island on a regular basis to their meetings. They still do. It's a very friendly, supportive community of people that are all sort of trying to do the same thing and have some fun while they do it.
Since you bring up a question about validity of financial aspects of that portion of this project, I have to say I'm a little concerned about the hotel, how that's going to be run. Just like there's concern about how that's going to work. It's thrown around sometimes, time sharing, condos, so should I be concerned?
Well, I mean, I'm concerned, right? I mean, I think we all have to be concerned because it's the first, significant hotel in this, at least neck of the East Bay, right? Bristol has the Bristol Harbor Hotel, but we are trailblazing to some extent. And you do that, I think, as a town because you want to have, a first in the region economic development driver. You want to have,
Sure.
things. So, with all those things come risk. If you want a Marriott, I can give you comfort, right? If you want a boutique hotel that fits the nature of Warren's historic district and the Warren waterfront and the town as a whole, that will take added risk. And so we really have to be creative in how we approach it. That being said, I think I'm concerned that the conversations about things like timeshares and condos have really, I don't want that to skew any perceptions, right? There is nothing of that flavor, let's say, that would be in this operation. First of all, you've got too small an operation to have anything but a boutique business. It has to be run by somebody who is probably the business owner and operator. It's probably, going to be small and very customized in terms of how they sell it and what their brand is, much like many of the businesses in the neighborhood already are. And the size of it doesn't allow for anything else. It's not big enough. It's just not big enough to sort of have a slick national brand or anything like that. So in order to make this work, we're going to have to appeal to what is appealing about this particular neighborhood. A lot of that will be captured, I think, in the legal documents that surround that component. And I think, I hate to tell Tony, he's got 300 pages of condotel, paperwork ahead of him. But, that's what I'm reading right now to try to get my head around how this would work best. But I can also, we can also put, so for example, I'm looking at one that was done down in Orlando, Florida, and they actually provided a complete tax exemption for those owners, real estate property tax exemption. In exchange for that, they built into the condo documents that no one could live in any of those things for more than 30 days in a 29 days in a 30-day period. I forget what it was. And they can't claim homestead exemptions, and they can't claim residency through these units. And there's a host of contractual provisions that were built in to benefit the town and protect the town from this thing going askew and not being what the developer had proposed. And so they contracted around those types of concerns. And we are more than willing to do that because as much as you don't want to see that there, I don't want to see that there. My tenants don't want to see, that next door to them. And I think we can, if we want to set some parameters that would make the council comfortable, then let's set those parameters.
Yeah, we're ahead of ourselves now, though.
Well,
We've got some predicate.
He just doesn't want to do the 300 pages. Hold on.
No, that's fine, but to me, that's putting the cart before the horse. You really need to know what the financing is. Then we can talk about the 300 pages.
but I think Gio is looking for, buy-in from council on this.
Yeah, right. I mean, this is really my, if I've said anything repeatedly tonight, it's that, the time sliding is my biggest fear here. And Bob referenced it as well. He and I have talked about this. My biggest fear is that, nationally, the economy slides and we find ourselves, the $100,000 of URBA money here or the 1.6 million in TIF money is nothing compared to what will happen to these formulas if the interest rates go to 8%. Right? We're done. We're walking away because there's no project that can be funded if the interest rates slide to twice what we have budgeted here. So if we don't do this quickly and lock in those rates, we run the risk of not having this project for another 5 years until they come down again. And I don't care if it's me or any other developer. It can't be done if the numbers don't work, because if you don't make money, you don't develop.
Hey, if we don't get out of this meeting,
Yeah.
keep talking about the same thing, we're never gonna get to it. We're gonna slide right through because the meeting doesn't end.
Do we need, what type of action do we need tonight, if any?
Just because it's discussion and action, I think the motion should be to refer the matter to the manager, planner, and solicitor to meet with the developer and the developer's financing agents, along with the town's financial advisors, and report to the council as to how this project will be financed.
I will make a motion that we refer the matter to the town manager and the town solicitor to meet with the financial agents of both the town and the developer and report back to the council on the financing status
Include the planner.
and the planner.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion to it, oh, we can't, we gotta go to,
Yes.
I will make a motion, we go into executive session. No, can't close it till we're done.
Until we're
It's on
done.
the same agenda. Yeah.
Yes. So we need.
I'll second. Yes.
So roll call, Councilman Heckler, Councilman Kalenda,
Aye.
Vice President Hanley,
Aye.
and for myself, aye. So
Everybody get out.
everybody skedaddle. Thank you. And are we going to stay here?
Yes.
Okay.
We're at the top of the hill. The other day, and I was thinking, oh, because you got that Easement. Yeah. It's down on the right. Right, yeah. And I'm happy to cross the street.
seal the minutes? He's given me.
It's a mixed motion.
Aye.
Thank you. All right, now,
Good luck.
back in,
Thank you.
motion to reopen the regular hearing or the council meeting?
No, you did it.
All right,
Yeah.
so, motion to adjourn.
Second. All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Let's go.